One contemporary of Kobayashi Kiyochika was a man named Nagahara Kafu, a very famous writer from the Meiji through Showa periods of modern Japanese history, so from late 19th through really much of the 20th century. Kafu was a great admirer of Kiyochika's artworks, especially his scenes of Tokyo. And it is said that Kafu admired Kiyochika's work primarily because his sense of aesthetics and his sense of what was important about Tokyo matched what Kiyochika drew into his images. Kafu is known primarily as not just as a writer, but as a writer who was especially sensitive to the ways in which the city of Tokyo was changing from the old Edo into new Tokyo. Kafu was someone who was especially critical of the changes that were taking place in modern Tokyo. Instead, he admired what he felt was being lost, the remnants, the shadows of the old Edo. Kafu was born in 1879, just a little over a decade after the Meiji Restoration that overthrew the Tokugawa shogunate, the last warrior government of Japan. And so he was a man who grew up in Tokyo, what used to be named Edo, when the feeling and the sense and the impressions of the old city and the old regime was still very much in the air. And so he grew up learning and appreciating traditional Japanese music, traditional Japanese literature, the kind of cultural continuity that carried over from Edo period was very much alive in him. However, he was not simply a lover of the old Edo, the old ways of Japan. He wasn't simply someone who was nostalgic. He was, in fact, someone who was also fascinated with Western culture and art, especially French literature. He was a lover of the writer Émile Zola, for example. And he became the professor of French literature at Keio University, one of the premier private university of Japan founded by none other than Fukuzawa Yukichi, the major introducer of Western knowledge to Japan in the mid-19th century. And before he became a professor at Keio, Kafu had in fact spent about 5 years, first in the United States and then in France, ostensibly to serve as a banker in a Japanese bank. But what he really wanted to do was to engage himself with French literature, with Western music, and so that is what he did in those places. And he also became one of the first known fans of Wagner in Japan, along with other literati of that period. Now, Kafu comes back to Japan in 1908, after 5 years in the West. And he came back as, on some level, a thoroughly westernized man. He was known, for example, to complain about what he saw as the evidence of haphazard westernization that was placed in the city of Tokyo. He complained about the ways in which electrical lines were polluting the skyline. And he talks about this especially in a short story that he wrote in 1908 and published in 1909 called A Song of Fukagawa. In the story, Kafu places his narrator in downtown Tokyo, who catches the ride on the electric tram that had just been built in Tokyo in 1903. And as the narrative goes through the city of Tokyo, he looks at the scene and complains about the way in which various new Western-style architectures are built, but are seemingly superficial. He also complains about the congestion inside the train, which is something that a modern Tokyoite would still know. He also complains about the noise inside the train, the sound of people chatting, people coughing, yawning, babies crying. And so there's a sense in which he finds the Tokyo that he came back to both being modernized, but being modernized in a way that is superficial, in a way that is losing what he feels were the qualities of the old Tokyo, the silence, the darkness, the calmness. Towards the end of the story, Kafu's narrator goes all the way to Fukagawa, which is a neighborhood in eastern Tokyo that existed in Edo period and still exists today, which is in the part of Tokyo that is known as Shitamachi, or Low City. Shitamachi is the part of Tokyo that was known at the time of Kafu and to this day as the part of Tokyo that is seemingly still preserving some remnants of traditional Japanese culture, especially that of the Edo period.